today we're gonna start with just give me some minutes to speak in Vietnamese to give the the audience how they can listen to the translation, because while you presenting in English, so Ngân from our Ellie gonna translate in Vietnamese spontaneously, and after your presentation, there's gonna have like a 25 to 30 minutes to answer for some questions. So we already received a lot of questions from the participants who fill up the form. And so we would love to hear your answer to those questions. And if we have enough time, if some live questions pop up, we would love to hear the answer from you as well. And then closing. So the section gonna happen for, 1 hour and 30 minutes. So yeah, please allow me to speak. And after I speak in Vietnamese, we're gonna take 1 minute of mindfulness, a moment of silence before we start. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, please allow me to speak in Vietnamese. Chào cả nhà. Loan xin chào tất cả các cô chú bác, các anh chị và tất cả các bạn đã tham gia buổi webinar ngày hôm nay cùng với cả bác Otto Scharmer. Thì như có chia sẻ ở trên thông tin thì buổi ngày hôm nay thì sẽ được diễn ra bằng tiếng Anh, nhưng mà sẽ có cái phần phiên dịch bằng tiếng Việt được hướng dẫn song song cùng với cả cái phần chia sẻ của bác Otto. Nên là với các cô chú bác anh chị và các bạn mà mình muốn nghe tiếng Việt ấy, thì vui lòng thứ nhất là tham khảo trong cái phần cửa sổ chat, thì Ngọc từ team Ellie có gửi cái hướng dẫn qua email cho các anh chị khi mà gửi đường link Zoom rồi. Đồng thời thì có thể xem lại ở trong cái phần cửa sổ chat, thì mình có thể chọn cái phần cái hình mà gọi là có hình quả địa cầu ở dưới cái công cụ ở chức năng ở dưới ạ. Mình chọn tiếng Pháp để mà nghe phiên dịch tiếng Việt nha, chọn French để mà nghe tiếng Việt. Thì còn lại tất cả các anh chị mà mình có thể nghe được trực tiếp bằng tiếng Anh thì mình không cần phải thao tác gì cả, mình chỉ cần thực sự là hiện diện ở đây trọn vẹn cùng với cả buổi ngày hôm nay thôi. Thì nếu như mà có bất cứ khó khăn gì thì mời mọi người cứ nhắn tin trực tiếp lên trên cái phần cửa sổ chat, hoặc là inbox cho Ngọc, Ellie _ Ngọc Phạm và Nhi. Thì nhờ Nhi với cả Ngọc nhắn ở trên cái cửa sổ chat này thì để cho mọi người biết được ha, để mọi người sẽ có thể liên hệ để mà hỗ trợ khi cần. Cảm ơn cả nhà. Vậy thì từ bây giờ thì Loan xin phép sẽ nói bằng tiếng Anh nha, để cho bác Otto cũng như là các vị là người nước ngoài mọi người có thể hiểu được ạ. So welcome everyone. Thank you, to you, to
Chào
everyone
mừng tất
to
cả mọi
present.
người.
Sorry, I just listened to the. Okay. Okay, so thank you everyone. Thank to you to present today on the very special webinar, and the last one as well, within the framework of Genius Masterclass 24-25, co-organized by Raja Learning Institute, Ellie, and BTIS and Manatee Vietnam. So thank for being registering and also being present with us. So to begin, I would like to invite all of us to have a moment of mindfulness. You don't need to do anything. You just, stay still and come back to your mind, your body, your breath, and I will let you know when it's over. Yeah, let's have a moment of mindfulness. Thank you. Thank you. Once again, welcome everyone to the special and last webinar with Dr. Otto Scharmer. The title of this webinar is What Kind of Leadership is Needed Now? So first of all, I need to thank dear Otto Scharmer. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Thor's invitation to be here with us. Most of us are Vietnamese, and we learn, we study, we know Theo You, and I believe that most of us, we are here today because we experience the Theo You. We acknowledge the benefit of applying, Theo You in our personal life, and also in the organizational transformation. And we'd love to hear more from you, through the webinar today. And I believe that after, since COVID, for most of us, terms like Bani or VUCA are, become so familiar. And, all of us are witnessing the crisis across countries and across sectors in the world, from the health, the food, the economics, the politics, education, everywhere. As Vietnamese, we thought that at first okay, we live in a peaceful country. We have quite stable economics and politics. However, since last year, we, observed many, changes, a lot of transition in our country in terms of politics, economics, and also we are facing every day, we're facing the challenges in terms of the food, agriculture, where, a lot of, difficulties when with that kind of things. And even myself, I'm currently, as shared with you at the beginning, I'm in Italy. And this is the first time ever, myself and my family here faced, in the beginning of August, but we haven't experienced the summer yet. We need to wear the warm clothes and we need to wear the thick blanket while sleeping, while our colleagues in Hue or in Hanoi, they are facing the peak of heat, back to Vietnam. And I'm now based in Pune, India, where, in last May, my neighbor, he had to come to pick her, his daughter, 20 years old daughter, back from Mumbai, back to Pune because of the war happening in Kashmir between, India and Pakistan. So we're facing the war in everywhere, in, many places in the world. And we all understand that the interdependence, exists, and we are observing, the impact of every factors that we cannot deny, or we cannot, look away from that situation. But it's for us, it's not, the sign to be hopeless or to feel powerless, but instead it's like the wake-up call, the invitation, as you mentioned many times in your book and in your presentation, this is an invitation to, look inward, to answer the questions that, how can we listen from the future that is emerged, and what kind of leaders we need to become to serve that future. So that's the reason why we would like to invite you to become the speaker of our webinar today. And before Otto come to his incredible presentation, I would like to give you some information, introduction about Dr. Otto Scharmer. And I believe that, many of you, or most of you have read, but it's my honor to share it. So Dr. Otto is a pioneering thinker, Obviously, when I see like SDG or IDG or, UN everywhere, when I see the inner transformation and the national transformation and global transformation, he's always there. He always played a critical role in everywhere in the world. And he's the senior lecturer at the MIT and the founder of TU, the co-founder of Pre-Sensing Institute. He's also the co-creator of Global Action Learning Labs for United Nations Agency and also the SDG Leadership Labs in 26 countries, supporting multi-stakeholders initiative addressing urgent humanitarian challenges. And he's also author and the co-author of many, books and articles about transformation and leaderships. And one last thing before I hand over to Otto, because last month in Bali, where I attended the ELP, the Ecosystem Leadership Program for Asia Pacific, that when was the first time I met him in person. And, I was so impressed, not only, by his incredible presentation and facilitation, but also because of his being. He's fully present. He's so friendly and always has a smile on his face when he speaks to others and answering those questions. So that, made me feel like more admire him and love him, much more. And now, thank you, Otto, one more time for accepting our invitation and to be, to be here with us, to share with us about what kind of leadership is needed now. I hand over to you, Otto.
Thank you so much, Luan. So, hello, everyone. It's great to connect with you. And, don't believe everything Luan just said. So it's like, I'm just kind of failing as often as everyone else is. And if I really would live up to what Luan, all the things she just told you, so I would struggle mightily, as we all do. So it's a great pleasure and privilege to connect with all of you. I understand that I am the last thing, for those of you who did the whole program, I'm the last thing probably standing between you and your graduation or something. Kind of, it sounds like that. What I had in mind is perhaps share a little bit, kind of, so Luan, kind of the question you asked, kind of what kind of leadership is needed now. And I also understand that some of you already are somewhat immersed in theory, you who did the whole program. Others are just coming in for this session. So I will do a little bit of blend of maybe sharing also some of the basics and then open up. I think the main part is really kind of engaging with you and having, giving you possibility to share some of your experiences, your questions perhaps, and so that we can enter a dialogue with each other. So that's the plan. And maybe the other thing I want to say up front, I put that right now into the chat because in a way, Luan, the question you just asked, what kind of leadership is needed, I just published a little piece on that. Kind of that is at the end, right? It's a long piece. It's maybe too long to read, but anyway, there's the link. It's a reflection on that question. It's called like a mountain meditation. And it's just kind of reflecting on our current moment and what it means for leadership and systems change, kind of from different angles. And what it basically says is, look, you can look at the challenges because we all experience the same thing, right? So we have like all the right intentions, and then sometimes it's difficult when what's happening around us is actually quite different than that, and it's kind of not what we see manifesting is not always exactly aligned with our intentions, right? Kind of so how do we and that's something that people experience around the world really, and change makers experience around the world. So how do we deal with these deeper issues? And So there is, and I, basically try to look at this question, what kind of leadership is needed now from 4 different angles. And the first one, the first answer would be, okay, so if you try to do something and it's not really showing the results you want to see short term, you probably need a strategic shift. Rather than moving this direction, you need to redirect a little bit, right? Choosing a different strategy. The second response would say, no, that is too short, right? You need to really think about a systems shift, right? It's not just kind of your strategy, kind of you need a deeper shift, a systemic shift, kind of how the whole system you're operating in, how that is organized, right? Whether that is, one or multiple centers, more centralized or decentralized, or other features. And it's kind of, for example, the way our economy is organized, right? The way our democracies are organized, our collective decision making. And then a yet deeper response would say, no, it's even deeper. The challenge that we face today has even a deeper dimension. And that has to do with the deep assumptions based on which we are constructing an economic system, for example, one way or another way. So what are these deep assumptions? That's called a paradigm, right? It's the worldview, right? It's kind of the paradigm of thought based on which we think about the economy, we think about democracy, we think about society. And I would say that's kind of the third layer, right? A yet deeper level. It's not just strategic shift, not just a systemic shift, but a paradigm shift, kind of where we need to move from a more, worldview that is more reductionist, kind of, and it's based on kind of how the elements of matter interact with each other to a more holistic point of view, right? Kind of that is taking into account body and mind, right? Or body, mind, and spirit, if you want. And then on a deepest level, right? You could even say, yeah, kind of the paradigm shift, that is kind of one dimension, but there's even something deeper beneath. And that's kind of what I try to unearth with this link that I just shared with you. And that is really, so that's the fourth level, is really about a deeper shift of being, right? A shift of being towards becoming. And you could say, maybe speaking about your own kind of cultural context, right? I think kind of when you think about, for example, in your region of the world, Taoist principles, right? Kind of where, everything is arising and returning from source. And kind of where there is a more deeper view, a more dynamic view, and a more fluid view of what reality really is. It's kind of not a fixed, rigid things as kind of in Western science you tend to think about. That would be related to this fourth level, right? And that's kind of the level of being, or the level of becoming, you could say. And it has everything to do with leadership, because you could say, well, that's something for philosophers. So why should I, as a change maker or as a leader, deal with that? Well, I would say it has everything to do with leadership, because whether as a leader you connect to the team, to the people, to the system that you're in charge of, or that you have some leadership responsibility in, whether you relate to them the old transactional mode, right, which comes out of the old way of thinking. I'm here, and then kind of the system I'm trying to intervene into is out there, or whether it is kind of a deeper connection, where you're actually part of the system and kind of what's possible, and you connect in terms of the system as a possibility that you help, as a possibility of the future that you help to manifest. That makes all the difference. So that's a little bit maybe a precursor of what I'm going to say. It's also a reference for those of you who are interested more deeply in that, can kind of look up. And that's a little bit the territory I'm going to cover. Maybe the other thing up front I want to say is I really, I'm really, I admire Vietnam a lot. And I have always regretted that I was there only once. It's quite a while ago. It was in 1990, 35 years ago. And back then, I was a student, and I led, together with a peace researcher, the peace researcher Yuan Galtung, who kind of basically is the founder of peace research as a science, and was very much inspired by Mahatma Gandhi's work. So we together led an international student group, and we traveled with them around the world. We spent a while in Vietnam. And so the two things I remember, among others, is so we went to, some kind, I don't know, some kind of public place or museum, I think that. And there was like a broken American tank at the entrance. And so later, in the program, we met with General Ziep, right? So General Ziep is the guy who beat the Americans, right? There are not that many generals around who beat the Americans, the French, and I think the Japanese before, right? So three superpowers, right? That's quite a track record. You don't find that another time on this planet. So that guy came in, and we had a great conversation with him. And he was among the only ones. So when we were like talking with him for the first half an hour, then it was, he shared a little bit, and then there was Q&A. And then when the fourth question came up, right, he, took that question and responded to that. And he said, oh, by the way, I'm noticing only the guys are talking here. We haven't heard a woman, asking a question as of yet. So kind of I think the gender distribution was half-half in the group, but, it was kind of, it was interesting. So he was 90 something in that when we talked to him. But he was fully aware of that dimension. It was really interesting. So a very impressive person. That's kind of a little memory I share from your country. And so it's, and ever since, so much has happened where you all together have really demonstrated the incredible capacity to let go and let come and kind of create emerging futures that are different to the past. So it's my real privilege to be in this session, and I hope that we'll continue that connection beyond also this session. So allow me to share a few images here. And so I hope that is visible. And all right, is that visible? Can I get a thumbs up?
Yes, Otto, it's visible.
Okay. So this is, I'm sure you have seen before, and it's kind of, I'm basically showing two or three main images to you, and this is the first one, and it's you can easily see what it is. It's the iceberg, right? So it's a visual you have seen many times. It's used for systems thinking, and the idea is very simple, right? So 10% of the iceberg is above the waterline, and the other 90% are below the waterline. and that when you deal with social change, right, you need to basically, that's what it says, right? You need to do more than just react to the visible issues, right? The top 10%. You need to also understand and engage the other 90% here that are less visible to the eye. And in theory, we refer to kind of what today is referred to as polycrisis, right? That all the problems somehow hang together. And Luan, you were referencing that in your opening remarks. In terms of these three divides, the ecological divide, environmental issues, social divide, inequality, polarization, war, and these kind of things. And then the inner divide or the spiritual divide, the disconnect between my current self and who I could be tomorrow. And that is manifesting in the pandemic of loneliness and mental health issues and so forth. So we all know about these things, obviously. And what I want to, and what, when you look at current reality from a systems view, a systems thinking view, and I was born and raised here in Germany. I went when was it? 30 years ago to MIT, to Boston, and in order to learn systems thinking, in order to learn how to be a change maker in society, who is doing more than just reacting to the symptoms, right? But kind of can really engage these deeper levels. That's why I came to MIT. And so that's kind of systems thinking applied to the current moment. That's what we see. What are the collective results that we create that almost no one wants? Well, it's, we're destroying the, natural ecosystems. We destroy social ecosystems. Societies begin to fall apart. You see that very clearly in the US happening, but also in other places. And then it's the inner divide. Kind of so the pandemic of anxiety and loneliness, particularly among young people, that we are experiencing really worldwide, is an expression of that. So I want to focus on that one because there's a lot known about the first one. I don't need to tell you anything about it. You know that yourself. And what comes to my mind in terms of this inner divide that has a little less attention is this. That in many ways, what is holding us back, I believe, is the illusion of insignificance. So what is the illusion of insignificance? How does that show up? Well, it's basically saying, you know what, this whole thing is so messed up, right? All this kind of climate chaos and biodiversity loss, all these inequalities here, and societies falling apart. There is really nothing I can do that really would make a difference there. So that's what I call illusion of insignificance. And so one number for that last year in the Human Development Report, one number that was published is that today, 68% of people worldwide, that's kind of 2 out of 3, experience a loss of collective agency. So they experience what's happening in their communities and what's happening in their countries in terms of collective decision-making has nothing to do with what they want to see. So it's completely disconnected from their own voice and from their own aspiration and intention. And yet the other number that was published in the same report, it's almost the same number of people also say that they would be willing to sacrifice part of their personal income to combat climate change. And if you kind of think about these two numbers together, I think kind of that is the number one leadership challenge. And that would be my first response, Laurent, kind of what kind of leadership is needed now. It's a leadership that is able to translate the incredible amount of positive personal intentionality that is already on the planet right now. 69% of people saying, I would be willing to sacrifice part of my personal income to combat climate change. To translate that positive personal intentionality into collective action, right? But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that the collective action that we see is completely divorced from what people want to see. And I would say that has everything to do with leadership and with our topic here. From a systems thinking point of view, how are we looking at that? The Nobel laureate Ilya Prigozhin kind of, so this is a quote attributed to him. So do you see still my my video? Okay, so let me go back there. So sorry, I just mix up something here. All right. So from a systems thinking point of view, there is this in nonlinear systems, when you move from one equilibrium to another, in between, kind of the system is hitting something that's called bifurcation points, which means kind of small difference. It's a point where the system could be easily tipped in one direction or the other. So it's a moment when small differences can have a huge impact. And that's kind of what Prigozhin is talking about here. He says, when a system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order. And that's something I believe is really important, given what I said before, which is that so many people, so many of us, have a good intention, but they want to have a good intention. They want to be part of a different story of the future, but we don't know how. So that's really, I would say, the number one leadership challenge. And that's kind of where a new leadership is necessary. And that's where this principle articulated by Ilya Prigozhin is so important. And I'm going to come back to that. And that's why I think kind of insignificance is an illusion, because it's only true if we believe it, right? But if everyone is focusing on what is in their sphere of influence, that's actually how real change happens. So it's not one big person doing a big thing. It's many small people doing many small things. So the essence of Theory U is really something very simple. And it is early on, when I started doing interviews with practitioners in the field, change makers, right? Entrepreneurs, change makers, in business, in technology, in science, in the arts, that I realized something that is very obvious. I mean, it's probably obvious to you, so I'm almost embarrassed to share it. But it was really a source of insight for me. And it's this, that there are two sources of learning. One is the past, and the other one is the future or the emerging future. And when you look at how we organize learning in society and in organizations, it's almost always organized around this first one, reflecting on the experiences of the past. Yet, when you talk to the real innovators, people who really bring new things into the world, they operate on a different process. And when I say future, I want to add a footnote to that here, or emerging future. What do I really mean? Because often when people talk about future, they talk about, 2050, 2070. It's a different time, a different place, often, sometimes even different people, right? That's not what I learned from entrepreneurs. That's not what I learned from innovators. Because what I learned from them is that the future is utmost personal, because it's a possibility that looks at you, because it depends on you to manifest, to come into the world. So the future is not something out there. The future is a possibility that looks at me, that looks at us, because it depends on me or it depends on us to come into reality. So, in other words, the access point to the future is in the present moment. It's not some other time, it's now. And it's not some other people, it's me. And it's, if I kind of establish, and how do I establish that connection? And the answer is with my heart. So I really, basically, you could say that so once I realized that, the next 25 years of my life and research was organized around a really simple question, which is, okay, if there is this other source of learning and innovation and leadership here, how does that work? How do you connect with that? And how do you operate from that? What does it take? And what I learned is this: what it takes is a journey that is essentially moving you beyond this, beyond downloading, right? Same old, by going through a sequence of 3 stages. Observe, kind of attending to the situation from all the different angles. Retreat and reflect, kind of deep sense making, right? Retreat and reflect. Allow the inner knowing to emerge. And then act in an instant. That's kind of the prototyping, kind of the exploring the future by doing. So that's essentially how 20 years ago I described this process, right, in the book Theory U. That was a pretty unreadable book, right? Kind of 600 pages, even more footnotes and so on. And yet it was picked up and it was translated into, 20 plus languages, because it resonated somehow with people. Many people said, yeah, that's kind of what I experienced, but I didn't have words for it. So today, I would describe the same process with just 3 words: attention, intention, agency. Attention, if truly deepened, gives rise to intention. And intention, if truly clarified, begins to catalyze agency, begins to catalyze individual and collective action that is moving us into the direction of realizing. So I would say, that's kind of the deeper territory of leadership. And it has all to do with this fourth dimension that I mentioned in my opening remarks, right? Because it's essentially about shifting the inner place from that we operate, right? The success of an intervention depends on the inner condition, the interior condition of the intervener. So shifting, for example, from an ecosystem awareness to an ecosystem awareness. So that's, or from a closed heart to an open heart. That would be like how to describe that. And kind of what is this inner place? It has to do with these three conditions: opening the mind, opening the heart, and opening the will. That I would say is, in a nutshell, what Theory U is. And that's kind of the territory of deep leadership and deep systems change. Now, when you, however, look into the world right now and ask yourself, okay, and what is it that's really going on the past decade plus? What do we see? Pretty much the opposite, right? So we see, yes, some of this, but we see also a lot of this here, which is a freeze reaction of the mind, heart, will, aka a huge amplification of ignorance through misinformation, of hate and anger and fear. And so how does that show up, right? So rather than seeing and sensing, which is connecting with what's happening around us even more deeply, denial and desensing is basically kind of, we are building up walls, right? We are creating, we develop our connections of disconnection. Rather than deep sensing or presencing, connecting with the emerging future, we are disconnecting with that. And rather than bringing something new into the world, we move into patterns of destruction here. So essentially, what I'm saying is, we have a choice, right? So whenever, whenever we see a challenge of disruption happening, we can respond by moving into this space, right? Turning away and closing down. And then we enact these kinds of patterns. Or we can turn toward and open up. And then we will be able to activate another kind of basic pattern. And yet, both of these dynamics, what I would say, so coming back to your question, Luan, what kind of leadership is needed today? Well, I would say, number one, it needs to be a leadership that is connecting with reality, right? There's no point in wishful thinking, right? Dreaming up something that's disconnected. No. And what is the reality today? The reality today is both of that is going to stay. Why? Well, in the US, you just had a government that's elected on this platform, right? Hate, anger, fear, and misinformation. Climate denial is official policy in the US. So it's all these things, right? That's government, right? That's what's running the government right now. The most powerful companies in the world, the Silicon Valley tech companies, this is the business model, right? It's misinformation, right? That's one, because if you want to maximize user engagement, right, you need to activate hate, because if people hate and anger, glues them a lot more to the screen than other emotions, right? So it's not because they want something evil. It's just it's greed, you could say, right? That is, so this is the business model. This is a huge power in the world. It's not going to go away tomorrow just because we don't like it. And this is just as real, because this is the real work we do in all the communities, right? Both of that is real. But what's the difference? This thing here has a huge amplification mechanism through social media. $1 trillion industry that is just amplifying it moment to moment. while this one almost has no amplification mechanism to speak with, right? Which is a real societal challenge that we face. But as a leader, as a change maker, you got to deal with both. You need to be bilingual. You need to be, of course, this is what good leadership is, right? Needless to say. But you need to be able to engage with these realities as well, because they are part of reality. And by the way, that's where most of the money is, right? So it's if you want to, get some traction in society, you want to be bilingual. You want to be able to. But how is it? What is kind of the inner leadership work we need to do so that we can engage with these dynamics in a way that is grounded in these principles? And so I want to offer you for that, and then give you a moment for self-reflection. I want to offer you 3 gateways into that, kind of 3 gateways into that kind of leadership work that allows us really to connect to the current moment in both of these dimensions here. And that is access your not knowing, access your discomfort, and access your non-action. And those 3 things have to do with, in everything leadership and management, I would say that there are 3 things overrated, 3 things underrated. What are the 3 things overrated? Number 1, it's knowledge, right? It pains me to say that because half my life is kind of writing books and stuff. So yeah, it's overrated because, and what is underrated? It's this, it's not knowing. What's the problem with knowledge? Well, the most important things we don't know, and particularly what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next year, next month, we don't know. So yet, as entrepreneurs, we as change makers, we need to take decisions today. We need to act today, but we don't know what tomorrow will look like. Therefore, what is it we need to do? We need to listen. We need to develop our sensing capacities. We need to access not knowing. That's the key, right? So that's why kind of this is a very important of real practical leadership and change making. That is very important. What do we know? What's the second thing overrated? Comfort. Underrated, discomfort. Everyone in leadership development, I'm sure many of you as well, know that as long as you stay inside your comfort zone, you're not learning anything new. You're not learning anything new that has the capacity to change your behavior, your actual behavior in a real challenge, in a real high stakes situation. So leaning into your discomfort. So this is kind of basically, how good are you to listen to stuff you don't want to hear? Are you disengaging and kind of getting furious? Or can you lean in and pick up new information from a stream of information that you basically don't like, okay? And don't want to hear. And the third thing, overrated, is perhaps the most difficult to accept. It's action. Now, what could be possibly wrong with action? Well, if you jump from a challenge to a response, right, to an action right away, what is it you're going to do? You're reacting, right? You're not doing anything new. You're just doing more of the same. And if there's one thing everyone agrees on today is more of the same is not enough. So access what's missing, access your non-action, or a different word for that is stillness, right? So stillness, equanimity, which is basically emotional resilience, leaning into emotionally difficult situations without disconnecting, and humility, right, as 3 access points to this deeper territory. So if you want to engage these more difficult dynamics that shape reality today, those are inner qualities that we need to seek out and cultivate, because they allow us, humility allows us to act, to open the mind, right? Equanimity allows us to kind of access our compassion, and stillness allows us to kind of to let go and connect with the deeper sources of emergence. So let me kind of pause here for a little moment before I finish up with one more piece and ask you, so give you a moment to self-reflection. So ask yourself, okay, as a human being, but also as a change maker or as a leader in my own organizational context, how good are you to lean into not knowing? How good are you to to lean into your discomfort, to sense into situations that are challenging, and to listen to information that you really don't want to hear? Okay, so that's a key skill. It's a key leadership skill. How good are you? Kind of, if you rate yourself from 1 to 10, right? 10 is, yeah, you're rocking it. Kind of, that's kind of, you're excelling at that, right? And 1 is really, right? So where are you, right? Where are you in, accessing your humility? Where are you in accessing your discomfort? And number 3, how good are you at this, right? So basically access stillness, right? There's, as you know, kind of, it's a well-known Taoist leadership principle, Wu Wei, right? It's minimal action. It's the principle of minimal action. So it's not literally by doing nothing, but by doing kind of going with the natural way rather than imposing yourself. So that's how good are you at that, right? So basically suspend your reactive patterns and to lean into what really is it that needs to happen here in order to come up with an action that can be truly innovative and transformative. Okay? All right. So let me then kind of quickly touch on the other piece, but that is kind of basically the first piece, right? It's the iceberg, and then it's the you, right? Kind of, so it's kind of, and really these dynamics. And I would say the presencing cycle here and the absencing here, that's a map of reality, right? Kind of, we see a lot of this going on, and these are basically architectures of disconnection here, right? Of separation, architectures of separation. And then we also see in our entire movement, of course, which is a planetary movement, architectures of connection, right? And these are 2 different pattern languages. And leadership is really kind of dealing with both of these realities in a way that is aligned with the intentions that we bring into the situation. Okay. So the last thing I want to say, and the third image I want to show is this. And it has to do actually with the place I'm, calling to you from northern Germany, not too far from where Ursula is living. And it's the place where I grew up. And I grew up on a farm, a biodynamic regenerative farm that some 65 plus years ago, my parents turned from conventional farm to a regenerative farm. And, it's, if I learned one thing kind of from my father, it is this, that the quality of what you see growing above the ground is a function of the quality of the soil. So the regenerative farmer's attention, right, is 100% really on this part, kind of the deep soil. And so I think about that, really the social soil. And when I, now think about that, I realize that even though most of my time I'm like thousands of miles away from this farm, right, in Boston, Massachusetts, at MIT, and apparently doing very different things. But in reality, I can assure you, I'm still doing the same thing. Just that in my case, and perhaps also in your case, we are not just working with agricultural fields, some of us do, but most of us are also working with social fields. And a social field really also has two components. It's kind of the visible part is usually what we refer to as a social system. It's kind of the observable, tangible things. And then we have the other part, which we can call social soil, because it's the root system. It's kind of less visible to the eye. And what it really is, it's kind of all about the quality of awareness and relationships. So that's really the third image. And I think about this image really perhaps because the iceberg has been very useful, but it has been used in systems thinking for the past 70, 80 years. In complexity theory, it has been used for 100 years. And I often thought, okay, maybe 100 years later, can't we come up with a new metaphor perhaps? And to me, kind of the social soil is a metaphor that is perhaps even more useful in our current moment, which is the moment of the polycrisis, kind of where all these big challenges begin to become ever more visible. And if we apply this distinction between, again, social systems and social soil to society right now, here is what we see. So basically, we see all the societal sectors up here, from agriculture, education, health, business, finance, technology, governance. And what is kind of the social soil? Kind of one way of describing that, it's kind of the quality of the connections, right? The quality of the operating system. And what I find interesting is that we see all these sectors going through the same kind of transformations, which is from output and efficiency centric to user and stakeholder centric, and from there to ecosystem and regeneration centric. So for example, in agriculture, from industrial agriculture to sustainable agriculture to regenerative agriculture, which is food as a medium for healing planet and people. In education, it's kind of teaching for testing, the old style. And the good school is the student-centric learning. But where is the future going? Kind of very clearly, in the face of AI, education for human flourishing, right? Whole person education, including all three, head, heart, and hand. And then in health, we have the same thing, evidence-based medicine, then reorganizing healthcare around patient journeys. But now it's, perhaps you have heard that term salutogenesis. So strengthening the sources of health rather than just combating the symptoms of sickness. And that, of course, has everything to do with, regenerative food, right? Because that's really where the healing is coming from, right? The quality of human health is a function of the quality of soil health, right? It's not different systems, but we need to develop that together. In business, right, we have seen sustainability moving from resource efficiency to ESG and innovation to really business as a force for good. In finance, kind of from extractive finance essentially to regenerative finance. So we have too much money here, we have too little money in the regenerative economy. And then there is, like, in technology, how to use AI in a way that is helping us to enhance creativity and awareness rather than diminish it. And of course, governance, kind of where, how to move from traditional mechanisms to organizing around shared awareness and shared intention. Now, what I find interesting is when you look at, there is a convergence, kind of all these sectors, essentially, when they move into this 4.0, they deal with the same questions: how to move from extraction to regeneration, how to shift mindsets from ego to eco, right? From silo to a systems view, and how to shift behaviors from reacting against the past towards sensing and realizing the future. If you, as many of you will know, when you deal kind of with real change initiatives, this is what you often hear. We are trying to solve the new challenges, 4.0 challenges, with old tools, with 2.0 methods and tools. Or we are being encouraged to shoot for the moon, while some of us are still driving the donkey cart. So those are like quotes we got frequently from UN country teams that we have been working with in 26 countries. And why is it? So why is it we have not made more progress towards 4.0? And I would say because we are looking at it all the wrong way, because we are only looking at the upper half and not at the social soil dimension. That if we focus on that, really, opens our eyes that we need practices here, just as the farmer to cultivate the land needs tools, right? Like a chisel plow, right? Or other tools for agriculture. Those of us who are cultivating the social field and the social soil need practices, right? Which is awareness practices, which is practices of deep listening, of generative dialogue, of deep sensing, connecting with emerging future possibilities, of co-imagining the future that we want to create and then exploring it by doing, and of course, new forms of governance. So, and I would say all the symptoms we see today, right? And I call this kind of the matrix of absencing. We don't have the time to go through all of this, but essentially mass misinformation, mass polarization, mass depression, the trend to autocracy and all these things in this outer circle, basically kind of moving back, right, to older forms that we see as a worldwide trend, is a reaction because we have not made enough progress here, because we are somehow stuck in the middle. So I think kind of as a movement, kind of we really, there's an even enhanced or amplified need to develop these new collaborative forms. So essentially, what I'm saying is that the future of leadership, right, coming back, Luann, to your question, and the future of systems leadership is this, that we need to deepen our attention from social systems to social soil. And what that really means is kind of that we focus on these kind of deeper, these leadership practices, many of which you have been engaged in kind of through the journey that's behind you. So if this is true, when it's small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos, and chaos we do have, right, and we'll have more of, have the capacity to lift the entire system to a higher order, then what is our role as leaders? And I would say our role as leaders is to create just these islands of coherence. This can be in high stakes, multi-stakeholder situations like here in Colombia, kind of between indigenous leaders, government leaders, and industry leaders. It can be in, on a movement building, kind of, this is kind of on the rules side here in Colombia, bringing people and activists and entrepreneurs around regenerative cultures together. It can be, Luann, kind of you are somewhere in this image here. So what we did in Bali, kind of on a regional level, kind of a few weeks ago, kind of the ecosystem leadership program. It can be in leadership situations in very traditional organizations like here, the UN, right? Kind of where you help people to collaborate across all these silos, kind of that they are boxed into. And it can be at a huge level of scale, kind of through the ULAB, it's a free, open access infrastructure. We run that every September and October every year. So it can be now as a multi-local community across the planet. But we also have, particularly in Latin America, and then in your part of the world, kind of in Southeast Asia, we have been focusing on really bringing leaders and change makers together on a regional level, because we are no longer in a single global world where the US used to be the center, but really in a multipolar world where these regions more develop their own shape, their own culture, their own kind of infrastructure. That's what we want to be in support of, and kind of really embed that kind of in a more a planetary movement building, kind of that is grounded in many localities and places, but also in multiple regions, kind of across the planet. So summing up, right, creating and weaving islands of coherence that help to realign attention, intention, and agency through the cultivation of social soil. That's, I believe, the leadership that is required now and in the future. What is the support structure for that? Well, kind of, so what we tried with the Presencing Institute, some of us here involved in that, is to apply these principles, these deeper leadership practices and principles on, you know, supporting organizational change, right? Your impact on kind of capacity building, like what you do now is an example of that. What we did in Bali, Luann, is another example. And of course, research, right? Kind of creating, innovating the tools and learning from what's happening. And what we believe is that we are part, right? All of us here in this call, we are part of something that I believe is the most important thing on this planet right now, which is the awakening of a planetary awareness that is not just kind of airy-fairy, some lofty aspiration, but that is embodied in many places in new practices. So what I think we all are part of, you are part of, I am part of, and we all are part of, is kind of it's, you know, that we are part of an planetary movement that is beginning to become aware of itself, that has many of these nodes, right? That has many of these hubs, and in many different parts of the world. And that out of these islands of coherence, kind of these living examples of the future, where we embody these practices and where we do this deeper social soil work, new forms, new innovations, new societal structures, and eventually also new civilizational structures will emerge. So that went a little longer than I wanted, but that's a little bit like a fly over the territory, you could say. I hope that has been you know, that this was helpful and maybe evoking some thoughts, some aspirations. And maybe we can now, and Luann, you can perhaps facilitate that a little bit, move into, you know, I mean, first of all, you should take a little breather now and really let all of that sink in. I said a lot, but also really just a little, right? I showed you 3 images, right? The iceberg, the you, and then the social field, right? The social soil. And that's really all I said, right? And what I basically said, so you started the session, Luann, with the question, what kind of leadership does it take? And I would say the leadership it takes is cultivate the social soil. Pay attention to the soil.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Otto, for your presentation. Incredible presentation. 3 slides, 3 main things, but take a lot of time to, digest, operate in the social system. And as Otto said, maybe we just have a minute of silence to let all the sharing and thinking to be synced before we come to the Q&A section. Thank you. Thanks, Otto. Thank you so much for the beautiful, images and sharing. And probably, I hope that all of us are, already got the answer for the questions. What type of leadership is needed now? We need to become leaders who are also the farmers, also the gardeners who take care of the soil, to make our organization or even the families to be flourish in the future in a sustainable and natural way, not imposing ourselves in our ego impulse. So I would like to start with 2 questions that we received from the participants who already fill in the forms, and then give the space for our live audience to ask the questions directly to Otto. So the first questions I would like to ask you, Otto. So for SMEs in Vietnam, so for small and medium enterprises in Vietnam, which often lack resources for innovation, how can they begin their journey towards systemic transformation and sustainable development as proposed?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'm a great fan of SMEs, which often are family owned, right? And that's really the backbone of many economies, because that's where most of the jobs are really created. That's kind of where the real economy is rooted in the soil, I would say, the soil of our communities as well. So it's a great question, because if you no, I was just I'm just coming kind of a month ago I was hosting or co-hosting a meeting in New York on with all sorts of faculty activists, how to basically transform business schools so that they teach something more useful, right? Kind of something that where sustainability is at the core rather than something marginal, right? That's kind of at the edges. And so one of the things we realized there is kind of most business schools here in the US are really kind of owned by the big companies, not by the small, right? It's kind of the small and medium-sized family businesses that are often left out, right? So it would be a great strategy, and that's kind of what we discussed there, to take some of these maybe lesser known business schools and turn them into places where they collaborate in a more strategic way. So it must be a place that is innovative, of course, and that is good, right? But maybe not the #1 business school in the country, right? Which is then owned by the big players. But something that could be turned into a more collaborative space for these small and medium-sized companies. So I think that would be now that's just one small example of a general point, and the general point is collaboration, right? So if you want the key for SMEs to engage in these practices is to do it together, and to do it together can go into two ways. One is everyone knows, and you know best, that every company really has a business ecosystem, is operating in a business ecosystem. All the suppliers, kind of, and the whole supply demand chain kind of is part of that. And then a lot of the community you're operating in, and so on. So one way of developing these collaboration skills is to engage with your business ecosystem, because you want to strengthen these relationships anyway. That's kind of one strategy. And then another strategy is kind of more like on a regional or a place-based or an industry space, basically where there's I think Vietnam, just as most other countries, we have mixed economies. There's market-based elements, and then there's also planned, where the government comes in, and you want to have a little bit of both, right? I think the Chinese model in that regard is quite successful. And but what you really want to do is you want to complement that with collaborative spaces, right? You want to, yes, there's a competitive space in an industry, right, where a certain number of companies do similar things, but you can complement these market spaces where you operate based on competition with pre-market areas of collaboration. So that would be, I think, the strategy. Pre-market areas of collaboration where you develop some of these deeper learning skills and innovation skills in the context of your own business ecosystem or in the context of your industry.
Thank you so much, Otto. That somehow you just been here for such a long time ago, but you understand the market situation in Vietnam. Of course, it's the mixed, in the Vietnamese economy, like you just shared. And thank you for your answer. And the next question is about you just share in your presentation is, the role as the leader is like you need to cultivate the social soil through the, concrete practices like deep listening, an open will, open heart, open mind. But in Vietnamese culture, where emotional openness and sharing can sometimes be constrained, how can leaders cultivate, courage, the will, the power of the will, and deep listening as you emphasize? Because sometimes they are so alone in their island, cannot create the island of coherence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I want to, I think it's an excellent question. I just want to challenge you respectfully in one remark, how you set up the question, which is, it sounded like, at least I heard it that way, that this is particularly difficult in Vietnam. And I would say, guess what? It's even more difficult in the US, right? That's perhaps the worst of all. But, there's basically, this is difficult for us as human beings, period, right? I remember, when I showed this open mind, open heart, open will stuff, right? And so when I first developed this, right, 20 years ago, I talked a little bit about that. I remember I went to China and put it up, right? And then there was a funny reaction, and so it was a group of very experienced leaders, right? So, and I thought, well, interesting. So I put this up. I didn't say much. I say, well, what do you think, right? So, and then people looked at the slide, they talked to each other, they looked at me and, looked at the slide, and then they talked a little more. And they said, so what do you think? What's going on? And they said, what? I mean, so who are you? You're what, an American or a German or something? This is not American content. This is our stuff, right? Open mind, open heart, open will. This is who we are. This is traditional Chinese culture. This is Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. And so, yeah, it's true. It's difficult to all of us. But I would say in your part of the world, it's much more connected with the deeper sources of culture, right? Than, for example, in the West. And of course, you can also relate it to other wisdom traditions, right? But I think kind of particularly in your part of the world, there's a lot of affinity. There's a lot of resonance, right? That doesn't mean it's easy, but I would say there is kind of a lot in your own culture kind of that is already kind of preparing the ground in a way. So how do you do that? I would say in general, you do it by creating safe places, right? You need holding spaces, right? It's not like people don't want to do it. It's not like people don't understand that. They do. But if I don't feel safe, I'm not going into these deeper levels of listening. I'm not going into these deeper levels of conversation because I'm making myself vulnerable. So I think kind of the key there is to create holding spaces, which is a context, right? Kind of that allows people naturally to go there. And so, for example, I remember kind of, I was a while ago working with a Japanese multinational company, okay? I showed them, I'm sure kind of many of you have done the levels of listening and conversation, right? Basically from closed everything to open mind, open heart, open will. And then, so I showed them the 4 levels and said, what do you think? Tell me. So how is it showing up in your company, in your context? And these people, so it was a technology international company, multinational. So they said, in our formal meetings, kind of, it's pretty much kind of level 1, level 2, mostly level 1, actually, right? And of course, in Japan, you have multiple levels of level 1, right? So it's kind of much more differentiated there. But then, and I said, so you don't do level 3 and 4, you don't do that? And they said, no, we do that, but it's not kind of in our meeting, right? We do that in the evening over a sake when you drink with your boss. Then you are expected to tell him the truth into the face. And I do, right? That person said. But the next morning, back in the formal meeting, I will never do that, right? I will never say that again. So in other words, so it's an example of what I said before, holding space. It's all about the context. So this employee, he knew that when they're kind of drinking in the evening, different rules apply. He said, I'm expected to tell the truth into the face of my boss. And I would never do that in a formal meeting, even not the next day. So what does that mean? It means you as a leader or as a change maker, your job is to create these places where these deeper levels of conversation can happen. Well, in one culture, it may be their meeting. In another one, it's in the evening. Doesn't matter. But can you, and it's, you need to adjust to company culture and to country culture and all sorts of things, right? It needs to be, but your job as a leader is to create this holding space, right? And if you're just kind of creating holding spaces where people are polite with each other because they don't feel safe to say the difficult things, you're not a good leader. You're not a good manager.
Thank you so much, Otto. Yeah, it's so true. One side, you help us to see the beauty in our culture. Because somehow even in our previous module in Genius Masterclass, we need to remind ourselves, and thanks to talk, that we need to be away from the mindset of colonization. We need to see
Exactly.
the culture, the beauty of our own culture from Buddhism, Taoism, Confucius, and our own Vietnamese culture. And at the same time, as the leader, we need to create the safe container, the safe context where people feel confident and feel safe to say the truth. But also we need to role model it, right? We need to open our own mind, our own heart, and our own will in front of them as well. Thank you so much, Otto. And so it's time to for our live audience here, if you have any, I see many questions written in the chat box, but if you feel free and feel safe enough to raise your hand, open your mic, and ask questions directly to Otto, is great. Thank you, Dũng Nhân. Yeah, go ahead, Em.
Hello, Otto, and it's so honored to be here in this class and listen to you. I admire you so much from the beginning when I see the tell you about years ago. So I see that what you are present today is a new kind of leadership, and it is perfectly different from what we are having today. So what I'm wondering is that we should make it something like a lift or a shift very quickly, very dramatically, or we should change in gradual ways, because I'm thinking about the system shock, just like both the individuals or the organization or even the bigger social system might have some shock from the very disruptive change. So can you share your opinion and experience about that?
Yeah, thanks, Luong. So it's I hope I don't do violence to your to the pronunciation of your name. Yeah, so I would say you need to be bilingual. And I think it's true for Vietnam, as far as I know. Kind of there's this really, but also I experienced the same in China, in Japan. There's kind of the vertical dimension of leadership is still very important, right? And but it's also true for all the other institutions. So in most institutions, you need to be bilingual, and here's what I mean. When you deal out in the field, say with the communities, with your stakeholders, and so on, you need kind of a horizontal connectivity. You need kind of the open mind, the open heart. You need to build relationships, because you need to move people, right? In most leadership situations today, you can only be successful if you are able to change the behavior of other stakeholders in your ecosystem that do not report to you, right? That don't depend on you. Well, how do you do that, right? You can't bribe them. You can't boss them around. What is it you can do? And I think the answer is the only thing you can do is to improve your quality of relationships. And that starts with your listening and with your capacity to really build relationships, human relationships that are based on their understanding. You understand where they are coming from. And that's kind of building this relationship. And it's the relationship that allows you to shift their behavior, right? So that's kind of this kind of open-hearted literacy. Then guess what? You come back home into your organization, and then your board is meeting, or what your boss's boss, or whatever. And often the headquarter, right, kind of, and they sit some other place, and they may assess you very traditionally, right? It's kind of management 1.0 or 2.0, right? It's not 3 or 4.0. So you need it. What is it you need to be able to do? You need to be bilingual, right? You need to deal one way with these in this ecosystem leadership challenge. The first thing I described, kind of where you deal with these stakeholder relationships in a way that's transformative and that's moving things in the direction of your intention. And then at home, you need to also deal with the old style that is not yet transformed, which is also reality. It's not going to happen overnight, right? It will take a little more time. So I think kind of this, it's not the old Western thinking is either or, right? And I think kind of what your region of the world is known for, right, is both and. It's not either or, it's both and. So bilingual would be the one word response. You need to develop both of these capacities, and you need to be able to adapt your own operating system depending on the situation that you face. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, makes sense. I know that it needs to be adaptive, and just like we are trying to say, I really like your metaphor of we are moving or we are traversing the other people from very different stage. So I need to be the one who can freely be moved between different states and bring them. So that's very meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nhan, for your question. Otto is, it reached the time, your time is, but there are 2 hands are raising up. Do you have time to, and everyone,
Yes.
do you have enough time to listen to 2 questions? Thank you. So we will reserve time for 2 last questions. I would like to invite Thanh, Miss Thanh, right? Please unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I can, okay. Thanks, Otto. First, I really enjoy the sharing a lot. So what I love the most is that the you. And you talk about the patterns also. It's all about, we have the tendency, from what I understand, we have the tendency trying to change others. But it's all about us first, right? To make the context, to make the environment that people can actually wanted to make the change themselves. So I heard you talk about patterns. It's all about people. We all have autopilot patterns, going from reacting rather than responding properly. So I would love to hear a bit more from that, because I love that aspect a lot, if you have some time. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, just also in the interest of time, really being very short and clear, but maybe not with too many descriptions about that. I think there is a really, so often, often I get something like the following: oh, I try to apply theory U, and so it goes to your first point you made, and then talk people about that, but they are somehow not ready, and so on. And so that's really all the wrong way, right? Because the application of theory U is not about preaching the U, but practicing the U, right? And it's kind of exactly what you said. It's about embodying the listening. That's how the practice starts, right? That's the key. And if you're in a real world context, so this is the capacity building. This is kind of, everyone is interested in this topic. That's why I shared a lot of slides. In a real application situation, I would never do this, right? I would start with listening, and I would not starting with telling people what they should do or what I believe they know. I would listen into what is it, kind of where's their opening, kind of, and often kind of, I think a good notion is kind of the crack. A crack is where the old system is breaking up, right? It's no longer working. And theory U, or deep systems change, is not good for everything, right? It's good for where the old ways of operating are failing, right? So in its, and you can only get to that by listening to people, right? But the logic is really, as you said, it concludes with you need to change yourself. But if I work with groups in companies or organizations, right, you start with what they care about, not what you care about, what they care about, certain objectives, right, certain they want to realize. Then what does it take to realize that? Why is that so difficult? Well, then you translate that into, you need to involve all these different stakeholders, right, and change how they are operating. How do you change that? The quality of relationship, as we said before, right? That is to the relationship. And how do you change the quality of relationship? By changing myself, right? Opening my mind. I mean, deepening the listening and deepening the conversation means open the mind, open the heart, open the will, letting go, letting come. So it's logical. It's really logical, right? If you want to see the impact there, you need to shift the relationships. If you want to shift the relationships, you need to start here, right? It's very logical. And to the degree that you bring it in that way, not as an ideology, right? Theory U is not an ideology. It is what is already embodied in our best practice. So to the degree that you bring in these methods and tools and frameworks, that they are helpful to people to make sense of an experience they just had, to that degree, you will not find resistance, right? And it's but it is really about translating this outer change into the inner change and embodying that first. So if you want to change someone else, your leverage point is to be willing to be changed yourself first. That's creating the connection, and out of that connection, everything else can grow.
Thanks a lot. So meaningful. Lots of lessons learned actually from that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cô Thanh, and thanks, Otto. And Phillips?
Thank you, Luan, and thank you, Otto, for all the sharings. Against that, there are a lot of good learning lessons for me and for many of us to learn from you today. And I liked very much indeed the quote that you have made earlier, Page, that when a system is far away from equilibrium, the small island of coherence will happen in the sea of chaos. And is it very often that we come to the certain situations where there's a lot of uncertainty, and when the system breaks down, and there's a lot of small island, arise, and everybody is trying to fix a system or make a change. But is there any guidance or any compass that can help us to navigate that? In which group up coherent island that is relevant, is impactful for us to contribute to make a change in a holistic way. Because I see that sometimes there's a very merged line or thin line in between a chaos or some activated island that people want to really drive forward to the change. And we just need to have some guidance from you, if there is, that can help us to see it more clearer. How should we act?
Yeah, well, it's a great, Phillips, it's a great question, also comment what you just said. So I would say, there is a lot of innovation is actually growing out of chaos, right? So chaos is like a negative term to some degree, but it's also from an innovation point of view, right? And a creativity point of view, it's also a positive term, right? Because chaos is lack of order. That means, and out of that lack of order, a new idea, a new order, something new can emerge. And that's, but what is the condition for that to happen? And the condition is you need to hold the gaze steady, right? You need to attend to that, even though you don't know what the next step will be. So you don't know what's going on. You don't know what is going to be your next step. That's the moment where you need to engage and not disengage, right? So the key is to connect and to be willing to confront your not knowing, to confront your not feeling comfortable, and to confront and stay with, right? When I say confront, I mean really staying with, right? I don't know what the next step is. And I would say this not knowing is usually something we try to avoid. But in the context of creativity and also in the context of awareness training, that's a very highly rated skill, right? Because not knowing what's going on is the source of generating a new idea, right? It's the source of the next moment's intuition. When you already know everything, you're not going to have a new idea, right? So it's only when we lean into the not knowing, when we lean into the discomfort, when we lean into the stillness, and we have the capacity to stay with that. And I will give you an example. A few years ago, it's actually, more than 10 years ago already, but it was a very clear example. Some of you may remember the global financial crisis, right? Kind of basically, it basically imploded all the revenues of global companies. I was working with a global company back then, and so basically they had a collapse of revenues and of cash, right? And you can go broke if you lose your cash, right? That's a big issue, right? So no one knew what to do. And I saw in the same company, in some teams, in some areas, people grew together much more closely. They created actually these islands of coherence, while in other parts of the same company, in the same moment, the opposite happened. And why is that? Well, that's kind of a good question, but I would say kind of more from anecdotal observation, that's not really kind of profoundly research-based, but I have seen that multiple times. What explains the difference is, in one word, leadership. So in other words, it's you. To be more specific, it's your capacity to show up in front of your teams, in front of your stakeholders, even though you don't know fully what's going on, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and you don't have a plan how we really should strategically respond to that. And even though you go blank on all these questions, you show up for your people, you are there, you're connecting with them in your own biggest moment of vulnerability and of not knowing, which is, as we all know, as a leader, completely embarrassing. But that's when you are out there, you connect, and that's which allows the team to grow together, right? And really kind of create the coherence. And those people who pulled out, who retreated, who tried to figure out individually, kind of through analytical skills to strategize themselves out of the situation, they lost their teams, right? They may have come up with a good strategy, I don't know, but they lost their teams in the meantime. And I think that's an example. If there's one thing we know about the future, it's this: disruption and chaos is going to stay. And why is that? Because of the ecological divide, the social divides, and all the other stuff going on, right? We'll see more of that. And we need to be fearless. We need to be, not avoiding these situations, but facing them, right? Holding the gaze steady into, even though it comes with discomfort. And then the emerging future is very close. So I have always been inspired, not only because it's a beautiful line, but also because in my life, I have experienced it's actually true. The following line by the German poet Hölderlin, who said, "But where the danger is, the saving power also grows." Mm-hmm. But where the danger is, the saving power also grows. And you will only connect to the second part if you have the courage and the compassion to hold your gaze steady.
Thank you very much. That's so inspiring and so clear.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your beautiful sharing and beautiful answers to the questions. I also saw some hands raised. However, the time is over 30 minutes. So we would like to end here, and we hope that we have a next time with Otto and to our Vietnamese and international friends. And thank you, Otto, so much for showing today for us. And that reminds us about, in the era of AI and also the GI in 30 years, it's time for us, for each of us, to nurture the HI, the heart intelligence. And, in the time of, we try to digitalize in all everywhere in the organization, it's time to become a farmer, a gardener, to nurture our soils. Thank you so much, Otto, for being here today. And thank you so much, everyone, to participating, our webinar today. And please, if you are interested in learning and studying more about ClearU or other initiative from, U School U Lab, you have the link on the chat. And for Vietnamese friends, if you are interested, we are going to have, probably, the Happy Organization and Happy School projects in Vietnam. You can follow on Eurasia Learning Institute page. And who knows, probably one day we can invite Otto come to Vietnam in person and to conduct a workshop, a training, or a program for us. And please come to Vietnam, our international friends. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you so very much. It was wonderful to have a moment together here. Let's stay connected.
Otto. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good day, good afternoon, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Good night. Thank you so much.
Bye everyone from Thanh Đình.
Bye.
Bye bye, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye,
Enjoy.
Eddie,
Bye.
Jean-Pierre.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye cả nhà.